But, Ethan, do you want to move on to Donovan Clingan, the UConn center?
Sure. Would you like me to go first, or would you like to?
What a dealer's choice.
In that case, I'll go first. Donovan Clingan, I have a little bit less to talk about. I think he's more of a black and white prospect than Alexandre Sarr. He's played a little bit longer, a little bit older. He's not as mobile. Obviously, he's a real classic old school center. He's a 7-footer. He's a solid defender. He's not very athletic. He's not going to wow you with his speed, quickness, or vertical. But he plays smart defense. Plays smart offense too. He's a great passer. Really has a knack for finding open man on cuts, kind of like Zach Collins, kind of like Domantas Sabonis. But he also has a post up game. Um, my comp for him, and this is what I texted you, is Roy Hibbert, but if Roy Hibbert had better low post touch. Um, and I think that's a pretty solid comparison for what you can expect from Donovan Clingan. I wouldn't start him next to Victor Wembanyama because I think that the fears you have with Sarr and Wemby are realities with Clingan and Wemby. Because, like I said, he's not defending anybody along the perimeter. That's just not his game. And I think that they would get in each other's way. He's not a three-point sniper at all. I don't think he has the potential really to be a three-point sniper. Maybe like a mid to low 30% guy, but he's never going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
better than that. So I like him. I think he solves a lot of problems as a backup center. If he's available at 7 or 6 and Versace is not on the board, we have our point guard, whoever that is, whatever. Sure, I think draft him. He's a more than capable backup center for the future.
Yeah, so I think that's a key point there because when we're talking about Sarr, we're probably talking about more of a starter. And that's not to say that maybe Donovan Clingan can't eventually develop
Hmm.
into a starter. But coming straight into the league, like you mentioned, I think a lot of those fears would be exacerbated just with rookie Donovan Clingan. With that being said, I hate to say this, Ethan, but I think right now he'd be an upgrade over Zach off the bench.
I, I hate to say it too, but I think I'd agree with that.
That's why I had the look on my face before I
Yeah.
said that.
No, what's every complaint we had
Yeah.
last year when Wemby sat on the bench? It's like we can't get a rebound. We're getting out physical to the paint. Guys are just getting easy layups. Like, can we please get a stop? And that's what Donovan Clingan would be able to do. He would clog the lane. He would get blocks, and he would get offensive rebounds, extra possessions for our bench unit to actually score once in a while.
Yeah, and get some stops as well,
Mm,
which would lead to transition opportunities too. That'll
right.
help your bench offense. But I did do my Donovan Clingan, not necessarily deep dive, but I did a good tape study on him before today, Ethan. So I'll go ahead and read off the bullet points that I had.
Go ahead.
The first thing I wrote down was post bag. He has a post bag, which is nice in the modern NBA or the modern basketball era. Uh, Physical presence at 7'2", 280. Solid off ball movement in the pick and roll. He runs transitions lanes for someone his size. I'm not saying he's fast, but he knows where to place himself in transition to get dump off dunks and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, a mismatch. So, and this is a key for evaluating him. A mismatch for most of his opponents in college basketball, and
Right.
he will be a mismatch for some of the people he goes up against, just because he is a big dude. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to have as many mismatches either, which is why we're kind of talking about him more as a backup center than a starter. But he can score in the post even through double teams. He does a really good well with his post positioning, and even if, a lot of times he would be able to get behind guys and they could throw the pass over the defender and he'd catch it,
Hmm.
easy layup. But when he couldn't, he would make sure that he'd get good position in front of a guy, and then after that, a lot of times he'd go to work in the post. Um, He's got solid footwork there. He can finish with strength or finesse, and that means like he can dunk on people. He can put his shoulder in and then just get a layup. But if he needs to, he can also back off a little bit. Has a lot of post hooks. I saw a ton of those in his offensive highlights. So he doesn't have to just be the hammer because he does have some sort of post skills. He can be a little finesse at the rim if he needs to be, although he doesn't need to be often. Here's the thing that really stood out to me. I kind of knew what he did offensively and defensively already. Like, I made the Walker Kessler comparison a couple of weeks ago. I think that's a pretty apt one as well. I really like the Roy Hibbert one too. But his passing, and I should have known this with him being at UConn,
Right.
but he it, that's like one of the traits when I'm watching this. I'm like, okay, this is some stuff like where the Spurs, if Pop ever watches this, like even if
Hmm.
we don't pick him, he's going to be like, I love the passing that this guy has. They ran a lot of sets through him too. I talked about them running sets through Stephon Castle a lot. There were a lot of times where I saw his post playmaking at the elbow, the top of the key, and even in pick and roll situations. So he'd get the roll, and if there's two guys crashing and then somebody coming on a backdoor, he'll hit the bounce pass for a backdoor. He's a willing passer and he reads the floor well and he
Hmm.
looks to pass, as a big. Even, as someone being as big as he is and, having the interior scoring ability that he did in college, he wasn't just like, okay, because I've got the ball and I'm 7'2", 280, I'm just going to go try to barrel in and get a bucket. Like he was, okay, what can I make in the moment, in motion? Like, what's the best play here? Is it a bounce pass or should I put my shoulder into this guy? And
Hmm.
so I like the basketball IQ there from him. Um, a lot of backdoor reads. I saw a ton of those, whether he was at the elbow or the top of the key, or like I just said, even rolling. Um, and then defensively, rim protector, shot blocker, defensive anchor, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, the perimeter is not going to be his thing, but with the comps that we've made, I don't think anybody's really expecting that. But good off ball positioning defensively. I liked that. I like how he can be away from the play and he can still read the floor and read kind of the whatever the ball handler is going to do, because there'd be a lot of times where there'd be a pick and roll on the other side and maybe he's a little bit more towards the elbow to guard his guy, but he sees somebody coming off a screen with a wide open lane. He'd give the help defense and stuff him at the rim, or stuff him against the backboard. And that was the other thing I was going to say. There were even some times too where I saw he kind of got beat off the dribble a little bit, but because he's as big as he is, he can block people from behind too. Now that wasn't the majority of his blocks, but at the same time, that was an example I thought of his effort. Like he's not just going to give up on a play just because he gets beat off the dribble. When
Hmm.
we talk about the perimeter defense stuff, and then the other thing I saw is, and I already kind of talked about this a little bit, but just a solid help defender. When I was talking about him reading the floor, there were times where I saw like the perimeter defender for UConn get beat off the dribble. He's aware of that, gets towards the rim, and does his job. Um, and yeah, the last thing that I had written down, I agree with Roy Hibbert too, 100%. But I had shades of
Mm.
Zubac, Walker Kessler, and Rudy Gobert.
I like the Walker and the uh, what's
Zubac,
Zubat. I don't know if I see Rudy fully because I think Rudy's still a little more
defensively,
mobile,
that's true. That's
but
very true.
I do like you're right about like locking down the paint being an anchor. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely not the same perimeter defender as Rudy. That is for sure. And the Zubox was kind of just, with him just being a big physical presence on the interior. And Zubox has a little bit of post hooks and stuff too.
Mm. Right, right, right. Fair.
But yeah, definitely not. And I don't mean this in a bad way to Donovan Clingan in any sense, Ethan. Um, but not the same ceiling, I would say, as Alexandre Sarr.
Right. I think that that's a very fair statement, Jude.
Alrighty, Ethan. Well, any final thoughts on these two prospects or anything else that we talked about today?
No, sir. I think that just about covers it.